Hello there, Sir from 17 once again. This is my Birth by Sleep critical Terra walkthrough. This is Radiant Garden. This is the first of 4 parts, I believe. This is a big difficulty jump and a large level. I currently sound like a nature narrator because I have this ungodly compulsion to cough, and I'm trying my best not to, guys. It's just really frustrating, it's so tickly. But we're going to soldier through because, you know, coughs, everybody's had them. Nobody likes them, really. Like, I can't imagine somebody who would like them, because they're annoying. They put unnecessary strain on your heart, and they irritate, don't they? Like, is there anything worse than an annoying cough when you're trying to sleep? I can't think of many things worse than that, in that kind of range. Obviously, I don't want to have my hands chopped off in Burma by a death squad, but, you know, I don't live in Burma, so my frame of reference is slightly tamer. Speaking of slightly tamer, you notice how this escalated real quick? We got one of those hourglasses, and then we got an upgrade on the big fat fellas. These dudes don't look like much, but they can really hurt. So you want to make sure to get rid of them, and they've got a lot of life too, so you're going to notice you don't hit as hard in this level, your magic isn't as good in this level, and they're going to be hitting you decently. Not incredible damage, because we're not level 1, but we're still going to take it. So, all of the spells that enable you to isolate and diffuse things, the environmental ones where you stop them or you bounce them into the air with the 0 gravity, all of those are going to become your best friend now, because they're going to enable you to isolate threats which can do incredible damage if given the opportunity to. And this is a game where the enemies will attack you from off screen. They will also interact with special maneuvers from off screen too. So one of the fundamentals of the action game that I really appreciate is this concept that unless you put the camera on the enemy will generally just move towards you to be on said camera to do said actions they like to do. Not all games will follow this paradigm. This is one that does not as well. But it does seem like you are given quite a lot of freedom when the camera is off you. Is off the enemy, sorry. So I don't think it's as bad as it could be, but I definitely haven't tested it enough to have any, you know, bold statements, especially after a year of not playing it. But just be aware that I've been one-shot from off camera a dozen times. It just kind of happens, you know, it's the way that the game works. You get used to it and you move on. It's only really an issue in the games where it's supposed to work that way. And for the most, like something like God Hand. God Hand is a good example of this, because the enemies technically don't attack you from off screen, but they will start their string as they get to you. And if they're off screen when it starts, it's technically an off-screen attack. And some people will often cite that as an example of this, you know, not being true. They didn't attack you technically off screen, they just got to your character and started their attack. And because the camera wasn't on them because of the way God Hand works, it looks that it works that way, but it doesn't. It's still the same rule. You'll never get hit by a dagger off screen, unless you started his animation on screen and then moved the camera. If he's off camera, he'll never throw it. Like, there are some that I think might, but once again, it's one of those grey areas of God Hand that I don't know too well. Like the boomerang from the green dude, he doesn't throw it unless you watch him do it. The charge from the bull dude, he doesn't do it unless you watch him do it. And you can turn your backs to them, and you can see them moving to try and get closer to you. But if you're looking at them, regardless of distance, it can proc that move, because they're able to do it then. And if you turn the camera, it's not going to stop them. That's one of the things that I think a lot of players confuse with that particular mechanic. And it's interesting too, because you imagine if it did? I think that'd be interesting. But at the same time, I think it'd be a little bit too powerful. It could set up some interesting stuff if the camera was fast enough, because you could have people doing dive kicks towards you, you quickly spin the camera, they stop the animation mid-dive kick, comes floating down from the air, you turn around and uppercut them back into the sky and do a massive juggle. That could be ridiculous. But it'd have to fit into the game, wouldn't it, to make it feel like it wasn't just exploiting and silly. And I'm wondering if there's anything comparable to that in Kingdom Hearts, because when I think of the combat, it's got a lot of air combat, it's got a lot of ground combat, it's got a lot of bounces and juggles and different multi-hitting spells, but I don't think it has too much manipulation of the AI when it comes to things like the camera and and what have you, any kind of advanced techniques. I mean, they will exist, don't get me wrong, but I just don't think they're as overt and as weird as some of the action games that you can play. And if you want to learn any of those things, you should watch Bizkit, because Bizkit's really, really good. And he probably knows all of them, and I'm missing a ton of them, and I'm underselling his game. But what are we doing? Thunder and Stun Edge. Is that going to give us a Thunder Surge? Is that what that's going to give us? No, it's going to give us Thunder Arrow, damn. Thought I was going for one of those elemental dashes that make you invincible. Which, if you're ever having trouble in this game, folks, and you can't quite, for whatever reason, get the dodge to work for you, especially in this campaign, because Terra's dodge is the hardest to utilise, if you get any kind of surge move where you do the dashing attack and there's a circle of energy around you when you do it, you can get a fire version, you can get an electrical version, you can probably get an ice version. All you need to do is get an entire move list of those. Every one of your commands be one of those moves, and you can spam an invisible dodge that does attacks. And if the cooldown is fast enough, you can just keep cycling through them, and it enables you to fight people like the Mysterious Stranger, or the Mysterious Figure, I forget his name. That super bullshit boss that cheats, that everybody knows about. But pushing forward here, killing a couple of the unversed. We've got the classic Hollow Bastion music playing, which I really enjoy. It's such a nostalgic theme. I especially love the aggressively ascending keyboard or piano, you know, on some of the parts. Beautiful composition, really, really nice. Reminds me of classic Kingdom Hearts. And it comes back to the same dialogue that I have when it comes to remasters and remakes. I think Square have been a little bit lazy with some of these remakes, or these remasters, whichever you want to call it. It's definitely a remaster, isn't it, in the grand scheme of things. Am I grateful for them? Definitely. I wish they'd have made them multi-platform, even though Kingdom Hearts has never been, really, minus the DS. For some reason, the DS is fine, but everything else not so much. Like, if this was on every system, including PC, it would have been so much more beautiful, in my opinion, because it would have enabled so much more customization, and it could have been really, really special. But additionally to that, they played it really safe with what they did, didn't they? When you think about it, they updated the visuals, they brought you portable games to the console, which is a wonderful thing, but it's still pretty goddamn safe in the grand scheme. They could have done all kinds of things. They could have added all kinds of different modes, instead of just bringing us the final mix, which is great, because we didn't have it in our language, it was only Japanese, but still, would you have liked to have seen, like, modes that enabled you to play Birth by Sleep's mechanics, or Kingdom Hearts 2 mechanics in, say, Kingdom Hearts 1? Can you imagine if they'd given you a redesigned version of the game, where that was a feature, and if you didn't want it, you just, like, hit back, like you do in the Halo ones, and it goes back to how it should be? That would have been so beautiful, and it would have been a completely, vastly different experience. And I love the idea of that, and that would have been the great thing about it being on PC as well as PlayStation, is there would have probably undoubtedly been mods, and people might have been able to do that. Like, give you, you know, Sora from Kingdom Hearts 2 and all his abilities and his systems, and added it to Kingdom Hearts 1. And vice versa. Imagine playing Kingdom Hearts 2 as Kingdom Hearts 1 Sora. Or playing as Terra and beating Kingdom Hearts' campaigns. It would have been so cool. But they want the cheap buck, don't they? They want a less money investment, more profit, and it's really unfortunate. Once again, it must be said, Shinji Mikami was way ahead of his time, I think, when it comes to how he remade Resident Evil. Because everybody thought the game was just going to be pretty on the GameCube using the same engine, you know, as the most recent Resident Evils, but he took it so much further than that, and I'm ignorant of whether or not there is another game that did this before it, and there could potentially be that, and that person deserves all the credit in the world. But just to do what Shinji did is a really interesting thing. And I think it probably stems from his personality, because he seems like a person who always wants to be pushing forward. He doesn't want to be generally looking backwards. He doesn't want to be adding on something that he's already made. He wants to just push to something new, and I really respect that. And in a lot of ways, I respect Kingdom Hearts for that too, because as much as they do whore the shit out of this series, at least each of the games generally does something really different in some way. Like, they went with the card system. in the Game Boy games, and they were just so different to the normal stuff. Kingdom Hearts got rid of some massive fundamentals in the second game and added all that pressing triangle stuff, which was a vast departure. This, with the command system, completely different to the standard Kingdom Hearts way of doing things, and each time it's been iterative and different and fun, and I'm really glad they did that. Don't get me wrong, there are days when I'll wake up and I'll be like, well, I wish it was like this and I wish it was like that. But credit's where it's due. They could have just kept the combat and added a few more shinier things like they do in almost every other game. But they didn't. They kept certain sensibilities, and then they just said, well, what about this? And went nuts with it. And I love that. I really, really like that they did that. Some games could do with that, some games not so much. The most recent one I can think of is Yakuza. Yakuza is an iterative combat system that's changed drastically since the first game, but they've still never got rid of a couple of those holes that they've got band-aids on. And instead of plugging those holes and making those mechanics solid, they've just added to this foundation, smoothening, but eventually just band-aiding over some of those issues. And it makes me believe that they don't think they are issues, they just think that they're endearing and they're part of the game, and they work fine, when I don't think they do. I think that there are problems with all hosts of aspects of that combat, from the grab detection, from the lock-on detection, from how the block works, from some of the delays and things, the way that the enemies never attack you, and there's a whole host of varying aspects of this. But they just kind of focus on adding more and going crazier and giving you all these jump moves and these crazy heat moves and like, I love it when the main character starts jumping on stuff and then coming down with crazy attacks during some of those environmental moves. But it'd be really, really great if I wouldn't get completely hard knockdowned every time I'm hit with specific things. And it's almost an untechable hard knockdown, because it's not about pressing the button precisely to recover, it's about mashing the button. And I don't like anything that wants you to mash rather than press. And it's one of those weird things of that game. And there's all these things that I was wondering that they would try and change and if they'd go different. And then they released a demo for Yakuza 6 and the combat was awful. It was like Final Fantasy 15, it was this super cinematic but ultimately soulless bullshit. And it wasn't anything like the games before it. And I was really scared, because there's an audience for this, because people love, instant gratification, zero skill, mash one button, win games. And that's what it felt like. Like, it didn't even feel like you needed to do anything. And it just kept going, the camera kept zooming in and people's faces kept getting like punched to the side and flying, and it was very, fancy and spectacular looking, but you didn't even feel like you were playing. And then they released the most recent demo, and there's been a massive U-turn on it, and it's still there in some ways when you do this heat feature, but it's gone from how it normally stood. And it was ridiculous. You could punch the guy 4 times, it'd do a zoom in and kill him. Like, it was weird. It was really, really weird. And that's one of those moments where you want iteration, you want change, you want risks, and then you get one, and it's just like, my god, what do? This is just not right. This is not how the game should be. And I always feel bad for having that opinion at that time, because they took a risk. Same with bands, when you love a band for so long and then they release an album and you don't like it, and you're just like, oh god, why couldn't they just carried on that string they were on? But instead they decided to go reggae or crazy or whatever they did that you didn't agree with. And then you feel like you've lost them, and you've lost what you had. Yet you wanted them to continue to expand and develop as artists, because they can't keep releasing the same album. And it's no different with games, only with games I think it's way more acceptable, because people will literally buy the same game. I mean, look at half of these remasters now, where we're all just paying for nostalgia trips. We're all consuming the member berries. And it's a powerful tool. It's a powerful tool that's been marketed heavily towards us. I'm creating some stuff here, guys, because we're about to fight a boss that's actually pretty challenging. So I wanted to make sure that I had some interesting moves. There is another move that you'll never see me use. Second Chance is exactly what it says. It is an opportunity to escape death. And people love that ability. People die by the sword with that ability. I don't. I think it's cheap. And I think it's cheap because In Kingdom Hearts, usually you don't die that much, outside of challenge runs. So I think that you should take the death, and you should learn from it and improve. I don't think you should be able to escape it. And I appreciate that my views are very, very selective, very, very niche. There's not a lot of people who play games like I do. But I'm all about me becoming better rather than the character I'm playing as becoming better. Because then it turns into the whole redemption run by Darkside Phil right now, doesn't it? Good old Phil is rocking some of the most broken gear in the game, and he's beating bosses on one attempt. And he's thinking it's making him a better player. He's not looking at the fact he's kindling bonfires to 20, so he's got 20 flasks when he goes in there, and he's coming out of those fights with 6 flasks less, 5 flasks less. He's not looking at it that he's wearing full havels with a great shield, and he's not looking at it that he's got the Black Knight Halberd, which is one of the most destructive weapons in that game. He's looking at it as he's getting better. And here's a little bit of truth for the master of honesty himself. Lazy builds breed lazy players. They breed complacency. They don't breed skill. And that, my friend, is fact. If you let the game coddle you because you're wearing equipment that doesn't demand anything from you, your skills will atrophy, and when you take that shit off and use something else, you're in for a rude awakening.